Welcome to Being Extraordinary with Akasha Awakened. Here we awaken the Akash to the non-physical reality that stores ancient wisdom and magic for us all. This podcast is dedicated to the stories, knowledge, and the people who have found a way to tap into this knowledge and bring it into reality, fully allowing themselves to embrace our true and extraordinary nature, and hopefully inspiring you to do the same. All right, welcome everyone. Today I have my very first and special guest, Jaclyn Mann, and this whole podcast was actually born out of me wanting to connect with you because you have so many freaking incredible stories. So I met Jaclyn fairly early on in my Akashic record career, and you just basically took everything I said and like ran with it. And honestly, some of the examples that you have are even better than examples I've had. And I'm like, we need to know about this. So Jaclyn and I both are really fascinated with the laws of the universe and how we can get them to work for us instead of us constantly being bended and swayed in the tide of the universe. So it's really like a vast cycle, but anyway, welcome to you, Jaclyn. I'm so happy we're finally doing this. I guess, first of all, if you want to give yourself a little introduction and what brought you into this world, and then we can just jump right in.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Kayla. So happy to be here with you. I had definitely been on a bit of a healing journey before I met you, but I feel like when I met you, yeah, obviously we clicked really well, but just everything you were saying resonated so deeply for me. And just some of the examples you gave just really made so much sense. And definitely glad to be here. Yeah, so for those of you out there that don't know me, my name's Jaclyn Mann. I actually, my day job is an engineer, which is kind of funny because I feel like I don't really fit the mold of an engineer at all, and I get told that a lot. But that is what I do for my regular job. But I have had a lot of health issues throughout my life. Diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was about 19, had multiple surgeries that were very hard on my body. Lots of complications from those surgeries. Also diagnosed as celiac as I think a result of a complication as well from just the severe damage to my gut. And essentially I got to a point where I had no other options left for treatment. Nothing was really working for me. And so I had to take responsibility for my health totally and find other options. And so I just remember thinking, there has to be more to life than this. Like there has to be something I can do to help heal myself, even though I was told there was not. And so I went out and I found that. And it took me a lot of time and a lot of effort, but it was a really interesting journey. And so I do have an Instagram account that kind of talks a little bit about my journey as well. But anyway, after meeting Kayla, it just not only did my health improve, but my life improved by applying these principles from the universe once I understood how they worked. So, that was my work, my time, abundance, joy, all that stuff started coming back into my life. So that's a little bit about my story.
That's amazing. And I always love your perspective because it's so like dynamic. It has been healing. It has been joy. It has been in your work world. And when I first started clicking into these universal laws, like I just bailed from my corporate, or I don't want to say corporate, but my mainstream job. And I was out and I just used it like strictly in creating this entrepreneurial endeavor, which obviously it works. But I don't have a lot of examples in any other like field because once I started this business, it just was everything. And all of my examples and energy are focused in this world. So when you talk about healing your health, when you talk about the jobs that you've been able to manifest or the opportunities, I'm always just like, yes, people need to hear about these things because I think sometimes other people want to resonate with the story, but they don't understand how it applies to them. There's like this consistent energy that goes through the spiritual community, which I'm guilty of perpetuating, but that everyone needs to become this really fancy healer, even when they're not sure exactly what they want to do, and they can only apply spiritual practices to their spiritual life instead of their whole life. So are there any like specific examples where you want, or do you want to talk about the universal laws? Like I can share them too, but if you want to share some of the ones you've come across that you love, please be my guest.
Yeah. So, well, I could probably talk forever about this stuff, but as you were just talking there, what I remembered, what came to mind for me was you had done a podcast a while ago, and I can't even remember who it was with, but I was listening to it, and I, at the time, was in a job that just was no longer in alignment for me. And, there was a time when it was, and I really learned a lot from that job and I really appreciate it. But after a while, there was just these signs that like, I just was feeling like a bit stuck and a bit stagnant, and I needed a change, but I didn't know what that looked like. And I was really feeling, I would say, like a little bit trapped, even though I know like that is our perception of things. It's never like the actual reality, but that was where I was at. And at the time, I was really into healing and really excited about, all of these different things. And you had said something along the lines of, if it's kind of like where you're spending your energy, with the law of like karma, like what you put out there is really what you get back. And so you were like, if you are, really into healing and positivity and doing all this great stuff, but then you go to a job that is draining you for 8 hours a day that you don't want to be at, that isn't in alignment for you, you're like, that's what you're getting back. Like, even though, you may not want to be there or whatever, it doesn't change the fact that you are choosing that every day. You are choosing that that's where you're putting your energy. And so that's what you're getting back. And it just like this light bulb went on, and I was like, oh my God, she's talking about me right now. Like that is exactly, I was really into healing and doing all this stuff, but it was like a struggle, to go to work every day. And I just wasn't feeling fulfilled, and was like, what else can I do? Like, again, there's got to be something else out there. But like at the time I was, 15 years into this career, and it was scary to think of,
Scary, yeah.
what else is out there. So that was kind of like a light bulb moment for me. And so that was one of the, actually not too long after that, I remember just kind of putting out to the universe, like, okay, I need a change. Like, and I don't know what that looks like. I'm open to whatever. Like, what else is out there? What else, am I ready for right now? Like, I don't know what that looks like, but I'm ready to commit to this. And not too long after that was when all of a sudden, like, a headhunter contacted me, and this job appeared that honestly was exactly what they were looking for, was my resume. Like, it couldn't have been more perfectly developed for my skills and experience at that point in time. And everything was just so in alignment, but it was still scary for me to say goodbye to, my old work and my old job. And I'd been there for so long, and it felt like my family. But I also knew that, like, okay, I literally just asked for this, and now there's this opportunity. Like, I have to say yes. If I say no to this, then the universe is going to be like, okay, well, I guess you weren't serious about that. Like,
Exactly. And like what I speak to everyone about is that the intention behind the choices you make, so what you do day to day to day, will be reflected in your consequences. So when we stick into places that just are soul sucking, our energy's drained, we're tired, we hate getting up in the morning, we're literally choosing every day to suffer through every minute. And then the universe can only assume that because you consistently show up in that format, that you must in fact like it. Because why would you continue to choose torture or self-sabotage or energy drains and not enjoy it? The universe has no idea why anyone would decide that. So when we finally make that decision that we want to start doing things like that actually serve us and make us feel better, the universe is more than willing to grant that wish. And honestly, it doesn't take that much time. Like, how long do you think that span of like that shift took for you?
Honestly, it was pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
I had been doing a lot of healing up until that point because I knew that I needed something to change. I didn't know what that was. And honestly, the thought of leaving that career was too scary for me to even really wrap my head around at the time. Like I would like feel anxiety. And so it was just like, no, I can't even think about that. But I know the more healing I do and the more work on myself I do, things will shift as they need to. I just had to trust in like the process, if that makes sense. And then I think I had my first session with you in August. And that was like when the light bulb went off. So I probably listened to that podcast, I don't know, like September or October or something like that. And I had the job offer by like the end of October, basically. And I was gone from that position by like the middle of November. Like
Wow.
that's how fast that happened for me. But I felt like it had been years kind of like
Mm-hmm.
in the making of getting there, but it took me, I really had to get to a point where, because before I would like kind of rationalize, like, I keep myself a little bit stuck in what's this? I think you had a term, um, like gratefully stuck,
Oh
where,
yeah. Yes.
it's like, oh, well, I should be grateful. At least I have this great job and I have all these benefits and I have all this vacation time I can use. And I would try to focus on like the positives, which isn't a bad thing, but I think I was using that as a mechanism to like not really want to see the truth of like it was time for a change and I needed something different because that was scary to me. I was kind of clinging on to this like comfort of this job with all these benefits and whatever. And also feeling like, well, I live in Saskatchewan, so it's not a very big province. There's not a lot of other job opportunities in my industry. Like, what else am I going to do? And so therefore it was like, well, at least I have this and at least I have that. And oh, it's not that bad. I'll make it through for another few years. So finally, I think in doing our sessions, it was like, no, this needs to change. Like, I don't know how. And I think that was the other thing. I always thought I had to have all the answers, right? Like, I think we get stuck in that is like, I need to know, well, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? But actually, the universe doesn't care. All it cares about is like, I just needed to make a commitment to want to change and
Mm-hmm.
like seriously. And then it was like, okay, here you go. Ding, ding, ding. Like,
Yeah. Or even just like asking the right questions. And they're like soul level questions you're just asking to yourself, but you're like, I see that you do this too, but you almost evaluating. You're like, am I happy here? Is this what I came here for? Is this my highest potential? Is this what my soul came here to experience for the rest of my working career? And then the answer is always like, no, there's definitely more. This can work out. But if you just try to figure out, yeah, the how, and you're not just like opening yourself up to what is possible, you definitely can get stuck. And I see a lot of people getting stuck in the how, but like the how is the least important part. I remember when you had got that job opportunity, you were like, I don't even know if this is a real email. Like, is this a scam? Like, it was so perfect.
yeah, 100%. I actually, because I had had a really bad day like a few weeks, but maybe even like a week before. I don't know what that timeline was, but it was definitely no longer than 2 weeks before. Um, and I was like driving home after work and I was crying because I just was like so frustrated with whatever was going on at the time and just feeling like, yeah, again, like, oh, there has to be more than this to my life. Like, if this is all there is, then like, what's the point? Why am I here? And I remember I was like, if only I knew a headhunter, because I had no idea of what other jobs were even out there like what other industries would be interested in me. So I was like, if only I knew a headhunter, then I would just ask them like, hey, what's out there? And so I kind of like didn't even know where to start. And then yeah, it was like within a week, maybe two max, I actually got an email through my LinkedIn, which if anyone uses LinkedIn, I don't know, like that has never happened before, that it
Mm-hmm.
usually it's just spam that you
Yeah.
get and they don't, so I actually had deleted it. But there was something about it that my gut was like, oh, wait a second, like just go back and reread that. And so I pulled it out of my deleted folder and read it again. And I was like, oh, I think this guy's actually like talking to me. Like he actually, I don't think this is spam. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to respond and just see, because what's the harm? And if it's whatever, not legit, that's fine, but maybe it is legit. And so I just responded to him, which is something that I typically wouldn't do. And he got back to me right away. And I think at the time it said the job was in Regina. And for me, that didn't work for my family situation and stuff. And I said, well, I can't actually take a job in Regina, but if you have anything in Saskatoon, like let me know. And then he came back and said, oh, actually, this could be for Saskatoon or Regina, depending on like the candidate. So then anyway, once we got talking, it just everything like fell into place. And it was crazy how in alignment it was for me. And that was my first also lesson in like when things are in alignment for you, it is easy. I think I had only known kind of struggle up until
Mm-hmm.
then
Yeah, me too.
in a lot of different areas. And I just thought, you kind of buy into those mindsets that like, oh, if it's, not hard, it's not worth it, or whatever, all those different sayings that people have. But actually, no, like if it's an alignment for you, it should feel easy. It does feel easy. And if you find that you're banging your head against the wall every day and you're continually frustrated, it's because you're not in alignment. Like there's something else out there that's waiting for you. You just need to like make that decision.
Yes. And sometimes even like when it's really scary, one of the first things that I'll often tell people is like, you don't have to just like quit your job with no other plan and throw yourself into the universe on a whim. Like there's an energetic process that takes place. Like first you're like, okay, well, I hate this part of my working career. I'm going to address it. I'm going to see if I can shift it. And then if you try to shift something and it blows back on you even worse or things don't change, that's a pretty positive sign that this place just isn't for you. I mean, we're all these like sacred, beautiful, gifted people who came here for a reason, and you're not being respected or honored or celebrated in this particular world. Step one is you have to set that principle. Ask for respect. Ask to have your job description changed, address it. That's what I did at my job. I went to management. I was like, yeah, this isn't really going. And I was respectful. I said, this really isn't, working for me. Like I'm the only person that's adhering to the contract. That's a lot of pressure. I feel like we're not maximizing our potential here. And at the original feedback I got was honestly like awful. There was no support. I almost became like demonized in my place of work because I was trying to advocate for my workload or boundaries in the workplace or an actual team that responded to what we were asked to do. And I was turned into a villain for saying that what we were doing wasn't, adequate. And that was the instant I was like, this place obviously isn't for me. I came forth with my sacred gifts, which we all have, and it wasn't respected at all. So then you're like, okay, this place isn't for me. And trust me, the universe is never going to punish you for being good to yourself. That just violates the entire law of karma. So, I made a decision to go back to manage at a restaurant, which was like, I went to university, I had a government contract, and I went to manage at a restaurant. And it felt like such an egoic blow, but I was also kind of just picking up with the Akashic records. And I probably took like a 50% salary cut. Like it made no sense how I was financially paying for things logically. I had half as much money in my bank account, but I swear things were easier to pay for because when you're in alignment, the universe just allows it to happen. And it seriously doesn't make any sense. Every time I've made like a quantum leap with what I'm doing, it has made no logical sense whatsoever. So sometimes it's just, yeah, like making that shift to honor yourself a little bit more by saying, what else is possible? How can this go? What is more in alignment? But trust is definitely the hardest part. How do you think you fostered like that trust in the universal law? Did you dip your toe in, or did you just go for the big show?
Well, I think it was kind of a gradual learning process for me with the universe. And I really found like, and I still to this day, I really like play with, I'll kind of have like a theory, and maybe this is just like a bit of my engineering brain too, but like, it's like, okay, I have this theory that, so like how you were saying how it doesn't make logical sense. I 100% agree with that. And I have experienced that as well in like different ways. And that was also really hard for me to let go of my ego self, which a lot of my healing, honestly, especially earlier on, is really like letting go of that ego self, or at least trying to like um relax it a bit, like, thank you ego, but I don't need you anymore, like, I am safe already. I'm not in imminent danger, like, it's fine. But for me, so one of the things that I was acutely aware of just through my other healing work was, just because you leave a job doesn't mean that, we like to think, oh, it's the job that's the problem. And so I was aware that, like, actually it probably isn't the job that's the problem. It's me and how I'm doing things, and like, I'm creating my own problems. And once you take responsibility for that, even though at first it feels uncomfortable from your ego's perspective, because your ego's like, what? No way, like, it's that person's fault, or it's this person's fault, or whatever. But it's like, actually, like, all those people are just mirrors to show us what
Yes.
we're here to work on about ourselves. So it really has nothing to do with these people or that job or whatever. It's more about, like, they're only showing you these things, that there's something in you that's ready to be healed. And then when you heal it, it's just like there's just this shift, and you no longer experience those
You're
frustrations or
not a
sadness.
vibrational match anymore for that place. So sometimes, yeah,
Right.
like that's such a great point. You know, I wanted to easily like blame, my unsupportive team, but really when I look back at that time frame, like I wasn't even supportive to myself. How could I expect my team to support me? So that's very true. And then that light just goes off and you're like, I deserve better than this and I'm going to act accordingly. And then you just don't match that environment. Hey, like it almost naturally falls away in some way or another. It's a very good point.
Yeah, totally. But there's also like, so I had done a lot of that, but then I also started to understand that, like, oh, actually, I also don't really fit in here. And
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. And maybe I used to, and maybe, by doing some of the shifting and healing in myself, I no longer was a vibrational match, or maybe the lessons I needed to learn, were done at that point, whatever the case may be. I think that's why all of a sudden, once I committed to, like, okay, I'm open to this change, and yes, I want something different. What else is out there? Then it was all of a sudden like, oh, here you go. Like, this job is more in alignment for you. And so for me, I can look back now and have gratitude towards those hard situations that I was in, or
Mm-hmm.
frustrating, whatever, whether it was circumstances or people or whatever the case may be, and be like, thank you, because I needed to learn those lessons so that
Yes.
I could really heal this within myself. And then now I have all these new opportunities, right?
And do
So
you feel it like build on top of one another? Like the lessons that you learned at your job from that you had for 15 years, like vastly assisted you in your next level? Like I can speak to that as well through my experience.
yeah, definitely. And what I found though too, so when I started my new job that I am in now, I, right away could feel similar themes kind of going on with
Mm-hmm.
things that I was frustrated with from before or whatever. And so then that helped me really take a look to see, like, okay, what do I need to shift or change or whatever? Because what I didn't want to happen was to fall back into the same patterns that I was in before. I wanted to make sure that I'm actually learning my lesson. Otherwise, what's the point? I'm just going to be like having the same struggles, because that's also something with the universe is like, we are here to learn lessons, and those lessons get louder and louder and louder, but they will keep repeating themselves until we finally hear and understand.
Mhm.
And it can get very uncomfortable until we're willing to like pay attention and listen and ask, okay, what am I not seeing? What do I need to learn from this? And so one of the, like, just little things, but for me, just being able to put myself first. I hadn't been doing that before. I would put my job first. I would, and it would look like things like, oh, I would skip lunch because I had important meeting, and then I would have good intentions to eat later, but then, someone else would walk in and need something, and I would drop what I was doing and help them. And I was like taking responsibility for all these things that really weren't mine to take responsibility for. And again, that's that ego piece, right? Like, so when it was like, actually, no, that's not my responsibility. Someone else can do that just fine. And I need to allow them because they also need their growth, right?
Mhm.
So then with this job, I was like, you know what? I'm always going to eat my lunch, and I'm going to make time for my family is going to come first and not my work, and just things like that. And it was really interesting to me. And you get tested on that. So, then I
Mhm.
would all of a sudden I'd get a meeting invite for noon our time because it's a different time somewhere else. And so I had to actually like decline or reschedule or whatever and just say, oh, actually, nope, this doesn't work for me. Can we do it this time instead?
Mhm.
Whereas old me would have been like, oh, yeah, sure, I can make that work. Right. Like, so putting yourself first, and actually doing what you say you're going to do, because you will get tested on those things. And it's
Yes.
simple in theory, but it's really difficult in practice.
Mhm.
Which again is why we're here to learn these things. So
I know. And the
yeah,
tests never really go away. It's just that you become so good at holding that boundary that it no longer feels like a test. Like I
yes,
still, in my previous work experience, I definitely learned like loving boundaries. But, when I moved into this space, like I think my loving boundaries still get tested on a regular basis. I just have practiced and passed that test so many times now that it's just commonplace, or people stop expecting things from you. And like if you have a crappy belief about yourself, honest to God, people will just reflect that back to you. I used to feel awful about charging money for my sessions and thinking that it was too much or whatever. And then of course, you just, again, all the mirrors, I would attract people that would be like, you should give me a free session. And like ever since I've shifted that belief within me, honestly, no one asks such a ridiculous question anymore. So your tests are real, and you do have to figure it out, or you just again keep co-creating with the universe the circumstances that you're not happy to be a part of, that don't feel aligned and are difficult and energy draining.
yes, 100%. And another one that I find that I'm still working on. And again, it's like so simple when you say it and it makes sense, but in practice, it's difficult because I've done this as a coping mechanism for my entire life through childhood, even. But I am like a list person. And
Mhm.
so with my job, I would have this ongoing list of everything that needed to be done in a day. And what I was finding is I was getting so overwhelmed by all this stuff that had to be done. And I'm only one person, and, all these, and it's kind of like a little bit of that victim mentality as well, where it's like you're giving your power away instead of just, taking charge and saying no to things
Mhm.
or delegating or whatever. So there's kind of like a few parts to this. But what I learned was, so yeah, I started delegating, I started saying no, I started, managing expectations on what actually can I get done in a day, and where does that focus need to be, and what are my priorities, and everything else, you know, is doesn't matter, or it'll slide further down or whatever. Um, but also what I found through kind of trial and error was I'd be doing really good. And then I would start focusing on, okay, like I got this and this and this done. Okay. Oh, I got, this and this is left. I really want to get these done. And as soon as I started focusing on what is left, like what isn't getting done, what still needs to be done, honestly, Kayla, it was like the universe was like, boom, here's 10 more things that need to be done. And
Of
I
course.
would really get sucked into like, okay, like check that off the list, check that off the list, like I'm really hammering this stuff out. I can just be more productive. And then so the universe is like, okay, here's 20 more things. Like until I
Mhm.
would learn, oh, it's not about me being productive. Like I can't force my way through this. I have to like learn the lesson in that the problem is I'm focusing on what isn't getting done, and what you focus your energy on, you get more of. So as
Yes.
soon as I started focusing on the things that weren't done on my list, I would get all these other things added to my list that weren't being done either.
Wow,
So
that
I
is
really had to change my
yes.
perspective, which was really difficult for me. And so then I stopped for a few days. I was like, I'm going to go cold turkey and not even have a list and just trust that whatever needs to get done can get done. Like, and that was a really hard thing for me to do, exercise and trust. Again, my ego and whatever else, all these coping mechanisms. And lo and behold, like things went so smoothly. Things that I like didn't even know, were on my list were getting done. And it just seemed so easy.
Mhm.
And people would be like, I just kind of put out there, okay, like these are my goals for today. And I also said, also universe, like anything that isn't mine, please help like figure out another way for it to be done without me doing it, or take it
Mhm.
off my list. And all of a sudden, I'm not even kidding, I would get emails saying, oh, by the way, you don't need to worry about this anymore. Like whatever, the situation changed. We don't need this. And I'd be like, okay, like, thank you, universe. And then
That's
someone else
amazing.
would email me and they'd be like, oh, actually, I did this already. So yeah, that you like, don't worry about that. And I'd be like, it was nuts, like and I was just like, okay, I needed to see this because this is the lesson I need to learn. But it's still really um, difficult for me to not fall back into that pattern when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
Mhm.
It's like that's like my coping mechanism, but I'm a
Yes.
lot better now at just being like, nope, I don't need a list. I'll just going to trust that the big things, I will spend my time on and they will get done when they need to, and everything else
Mhm.
will like fall into place. And yeah, it's amazing, this shift in my work life.
That is so, and I love that you say that it still takes focus, because something that I've been picking up on for the last couple of years is a lot of people do secretly just want a get out of jail free card. They really just want like the Staples that's easy button where they just hit it and all their problems go away. And especially with the increasing like collective stress, I see people being like, just tell me how to get out. And your way out is being dedicated to your highest and greatest good. You literally have to wake up each day and be aware of your awareness. Like the end of last year, so 2021, I had just gotten profoundly busy in every regard. And yeah, let everything slip. I went back on everything I had done, all my loving boundaries and all these things just went completely a wash. And it's not about being perfect, it's about progress and then being able to course correct when you do receive a negative effect. But I ate that because once you're aware, you can't become unaware. So when you dishonor
Yes.
yourself at that caliber, it comes back and bites you pretty hard. And then it's like that almost like validation or the instant snapback of karma to be like, okay, whoa, we're not doing that again. So you can course correct, but you do have to be focused. It's not hard work, but it's like diligent focus. Would you say that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it is just having that awareness. The good news is it does get easier. Like once you kind of fool around with it a bit and you understand like that cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if, for me, once I was out of um, the stress and the overwhelm and the anxiety, and I had some room to breathe and reflect on the lessons that I needed to learn, then I started kind of experimenting, if that makes sense, with like, okay, well, like, how can I work differently so that I can still do this work without falling back into like that, you know, super uncomfortable place that I was in before, that like was out of alignment and not working for me and causing health problems and, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and so yeah, for me it was like once once you feel what it's like to kind of feel good again,
Mm-hmm.
you notice really quickly when you start getting sucked back into that. At least for
Sure.
me, that's what I find, because it's like, oh, wait a second, why am I so stressed out right now? Like, does this really matter? Like, if I don't do this thing that I think I absolutely have to get done today, like, is it the end of the world? Or are we going to lose a lot of money on this project? Like, what are the actual repercussions? And what I found was a lot of these things were like stories I was telling myself in my head, that subconsciously, even sometimes, that felt so real that I didn't even question them. And so then you kind of start questioning your stories, and it's like, well, wait a second, is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that just something that, you know, is a belief that's been ingrained in me? Um, and for me, I started realizing, especially because I get sucked into like taking everything on and needing to do all the things, and it just, I was burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And what I started realizing was, if I ever caught myself saying, oh, I should do this, I need to do this, that was like a red flag. As soon as I heard myself say that in my brain, I was like, whoa, do you need to do that right now?
Yeah.
Like, do you have to do that? What's actually, can that wait till tomorrow? And honestly, like 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh yeah, actually that's not true. This can wait till tomorrow, that can wait till tomorrow. And as soon as I give myself that break, or allow myself to just take the step back, it's crazy how those stories and that perception, it's almost just like implodes, like it folds in on itself. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's this whole other perspective out there that like I couldn't see before, because I was so in the weeds of, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, and getting sucked into that mindset. So now, as soon as I feel myself getting pulled into that, I immediately, that's like my red flag, and I take a step back. And even if I just take a quick break, like 5-10 minutes, to kind of reset my brain, and always when I go back to it, I'm like, oh, yeah, actually, it's not a big deal. Like, that can wait. This won't take that long, blah, blah, blah. And it's like a lot easier again. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's that whole perception thing that you were kind of like, it's not logical at times,
Mm-hmm.
but when you are in alignment and you like can um, sense that those are tests, like you're being tested,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's like, oh, wait a second, I know what's going on here. And then you just have to trust that it's a test. And then when you say no, or you, like, for me, it's like I need to like allow myself to just take a break and not get stuck doing all the things. And then it's like instantly it it just like collapses. And when I
Mm-hmm.
go back to it, I'm like, oh, I don't know why I was so concerned. Like, it's not even a big deal anymore. It's funny. But yeah, I feel like the universe is like, ding, 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 you passed the test.
Yes, I agree. And it's wild to me, like, and those stories that you talk about, I have to do this right now, or the world's going to implode and you have to sort of take that back step. Like, sometimes for me, the clarity comes when I'm like, okay, why am I undervaluing myself right now? Why do I think I'm only valuable if I hit this arbitrary timeline or this story of what I made up, that's where my value is? Because these structures and systems and rules and regulations like aren't really divine. They're not part of being a soul experiencing itself in the human realm. So like lots of times my backtrack is like, okay, why do I not value myself right now as I am, as doing the best that I can with what I have? And sometimes when I just make that little edit, I'm like, yeah, like, why am I self-sacrificing? Why am I taking on everything? Why do I feel this all has to be built in a day when that's not, that's not the goal here? And it is crazy that when you can take that step back and you can just like breathe and you're like, wow, I feel really good right now. And it's crazy how the ego comes up and screams at you though, like you should be doing more. And you have
Yes.
to just like until you can really break free of the ego's hold, it's like it's very difficult. Like, or I don't want to say difficult. You just have to remain aware, like I said.
Mhm.
But it does get easier because you feel good more often. You see the feedback from the universe and you're like, hey, I know I don't have to worry about this. But those stories, it's like, why are you undervaluing yourself as you are? Because I mean, in the universe's eyes, you're perfect all the time. And a recent like message I received was like, no matter if you're 212 or 212, you're still a child of the cosmos and you don't have to be perfect and you don't have to take this on. Like, be gentle. And
Yeah.
sometimes when I remember that, I'm like, yeah, why are we always striving for perfection when obviously we all know that doesn't really exist?
Yeah, I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist, and I talk about that a lot
Recovering
with people
perfectionist.
too. Is like I would never expect, Kayla to be perfect. So why do I expect that from myself? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
actually not very loving or compassionate to myself. And again, like you said, what you're putting out there is what you get back. So that's why, I found myself in these really hard situations because I was putting myself there, and it
Mm-hmm.
was like that's what it took for me to finally um almost like be desperate enough to be like, okay, like I can't do this anymore. Like what else is out there? There has to be a better way. And then that's when I really started like opening up to the universe and um looking for guidance. And so for me, that's what it took. And, I think for everyone that is different, but I think eventually we all kind of get to a point where we are looking for answers and we're looking for, what else can we do and how can we make things easier for ourselves? Because this world is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that we can do to make that easier, um, I'm all in for.
I know, I agree. And like the greatest personal compass, if you're someone listening to this and you're like, okay, well, where do I start? I do feel misaligned. I do feel like I'm struggling. How do I start to course correct? Like the first thing that you need to do is really evaluate the quality of the decisions that you are making. How many times do you skip lunch? How many times are you eating it in front of a computer? How many times are you sleeping in when you needed to go for a walk to ground? Or, like what are you really saying to the universe from the moment that you get out of bed? So the moment you lay back into it, what was the quality that you kept perpetuating? And how many times did you self sabotage? I have so much compassion for people that are managing massive households. They have partners where they've put this, principle into place that they don't have to do as much, or they have children and calendars and expectations. Like, if you're someone who has that heavy load and work and family, like, you're probably doing it. You're probably self sacrificing and belittling your value more often, like significantly more often than you are honoring yourself. And it does take a little bit of effort to shift that tone. It doesn't all happen overnight. But as I've experienced, and I think Jaclyn, you could probably say the same, like every little tiny difference you make does count. At some point, you have to tip the scales, like Jocelyn said at the beginning, where it's like, yeah, I was working really hard on my healing journey at home, but when I went to work, everything fell apart. At some point, if you want to feel better than not, you do have to spend more time honoring yourself in the day than less. But every little shift you make makes a huge difference. And sometimes that's just enough positive feedback from the universe to keep you to get you to keep doing it. Like when
Yeah.
I first started, I almost like tested it as a theory and I was like, it's not going to work out, but it worked out. It worked out. And then finally I was like, screw this. I'm completely shifting how things go because you see it working slowly.
Yeah, I would tell anyone out there to like, don't take our word for it. Like, try it out for yourself, because that's what I did. And then I learned, the universal rules obviously like apply to all, but in how it shows up for you versus me might be slightly different. Or, what I'm here to work on versus what you're here to work on will
Mhm.
be different. So yeah, I mean, if you want to take our word for it, awesome.
Mhm.
But still fool around with it for yourself and test out these theories, and just like it can just be little things. It doesn't have to be, anything major. You don't have to go quit your job tomorrow.
Mhm.
I mean, if that feels in alignment for you, by all means, but for me, that, and I think that's the difference, like for you, that was an alignment for you.
Mhm.
And it has worked out. And for me, that wasn't, but this other opportunity came up, and I really think that I needed the position that I'm in now to really integrate a lot of the lessons that I've been learning and trying to understand how this all works. And I can kind of play with things, and see the cause and effect. Um, and even if you're that person that's like having a really hard time right now and you're struggling and you're frustrated, just know that you are so close to figuring this out and resolving something. It's just, there's something there that the universe is showing you that you have an opportunity to resolve right now. And it's always like, the darkest before the dawn. um I can look back on those times now and be grateful for them, but when I was in them, it was hard. It was really hard. And so I can empathize with anyone who's in that position. And that, I still have those times when something's coming up for me that needs to be resolved, where it feels like a struggle again, whatever that looks like physically or mentally or emotionally. But now at least I know, I'm like, okay, I will get through this. There's something here that I need to see that I'm not seeing. Like, what is that? And I can kind of, whether it's meditation, journal, I do a lot of journaling. And for me, that kind of seems to just like once I start putting it out there, usually there's like some aha moments. So it's like, oh, okay, now I see it.
Mhm.
This is what I was missing. And usually it's like the universe is making you super uncomfortable because there's something that's really important for you to see and for you to learn and for you to understand. And until that happens, it's gonna keep you in that struggle mode because you're paying attention, right? Because you're just like, anything, like, please help, I'll take anything right
Mhm.
now.
And
So it
seriously,
has,
like ask the
yeah.
questions to the universe. Like, what am I not? Don't ask the universe to solve your problems. Ask the universe to show you what needs to be shifted. What's the issue? What's the way out? Because when I was at my darkest before I even found the records, is exactly what happened. I was just like, give me anything. I need some piece of information. I need some connection. And then it just like blew open by doing that reflection. That's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, that's what helps me now. So not that it gets easier, but at least I guess it's like building your faith in the universe, and that, I understand the process now. So now I understand, okay, my anxiety is bad. If I'm having a hard day, if I'm struggling, it's because like there's something that I need to see, and I can look at it like an opportunity. And that just kind of helps shift my mindset a bit so that I don't get stuck in the
Mhm.
poor me victim mode, right? So I know
Mhm.
that's like so easy to get sucked into too.
Yes. And I'm like, I don't know how to describe the feeling. But it's when it's in alignment, it is really easy. Like it just seems to flow and land in your lap. But when you're making the edits, it's never necessarily comfortable. You're always a little bit like nervous because you have to really lean into that faith that we're really not, as a species, designed at this point in time to lean in, or we're not trained or enlightened enough at this point to be able to really lean into that. So even like though I think, we've both been practicing this law of cause and effect for a while, it's still sometimes scary to just lean into that trust. But there's the cliche saying that growth happens outside your comfort zone. And honestly, that's true. It doesn't have to be the hard work, doesn't have to be, you know, you climbing Mount Everest with no supplies. It's not hard. It's just uncomfortable because you do have to lean into the trust of the universe and kind of pay attention and be like, is this really the message? I'm not supposed to worry about anything. Like
Yeah.
it can. it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not hard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And most cliches are cliches because they are true,
Yeah.
whether we
Yes.
like to admit that or not. Growth does happen outside your comfort zone. I mean, as humans, we are designed to seek comfort, right? And so we want to be comfortable. Um, but that's not why we're here either.
Mm-hmm.
So there are
Okay.
times when it's, it's okay to be comfortable and that's great. And those are like our resting periods, but um, we can't stay there. We're always in a state of flow and change and flux. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but it does get easier when you can just embrace the discomfort, like really, really sit with it, and just allow it instead of always fighting and resisting. And I think at the beginning of our healing journeys, at least for me, I had a lot of resistance. I still do have resistance, but at least I can kind of tell now when I am being resistant. And that's usually when it's a lot harder. And when I can kind of just like allow and embrace and look for the lesson or the message or whatever, I'm able to flow a lot easier, and it doesn't feel as uncomfortable as it used to.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Sometimes it's like, yeah, I'll be facing something and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to resolve itself, but we're going to have to find out because I can't personally resolve it. And you're like, I'm scared, don't know what's going to happen, but it always seems to work out, especially when you just relax. Like I find when I resist things, it's very prolonged. Like it takes a very long time for this issue to resolve itself, but if you just let go, it seems to happen so much faster. So resistance just breeds more resistance, to be honest. Cause and effect.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, for me, what I found started to happen is all these fears started coming to the surface. So for so long, we put all these coping mechanisms in place to, all these different masks on so that we don't show our fear or our vulnerabilities or whatever the case may be. Um, but once you start doing this work, it's like that all starts coming to the surface because emotions get stuck in our bodies if we don't allow ourselves to feel them and release them. And they, can turn into disease, which was what happened in my case. And so I'm still learning how to feel my emotions. I know that sounds strange, but for so long, I was so used to like, if I felt fear or anger or worry come up, I would just like shove it down. I was like, oh, that doesn't feel good. That's uncomfortable. I'm just gonna like, nope, I'm fine. All good. Like, but actually that made me very, very sick. And so now when I feel that, my immediate like knee jerk response, like almost like subconsciously, is I still can tell like I just want to like shove it down, and I'm like, oh, whoa, actually, like, okay, what's that emotion? Okay, why am I angry right now? Like, and like it's okay for me to feel this, and I need to just like sit with it. What is it trying to show me? And then release it and allow it, um, and actually I can go through, like, emotions don't stick with me nearly as long as they used to because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so resistant anymore. So it's like what I've learned is like emotions are just messengers for us to show
Mm-hmm.
us, you need to pay attention to this. Like there's something here that you need to see. Why does this make you angry? Why does this make you sad? Why does this, why are you scared of this or whatever? But that in and of itself can be a very uncomfortable process.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's still like I'm still working through that. But the more I do it, um, the easier it becomes, the more comfortable I can get with it, and the more I learn, to be honest. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And knowledge is, really power. Like the more that you understand what's happening and you can honestly just take that 2 seconds, it doesn't take very long to reflect, to be like, oh, I shouldn't be shoulding about everything. Or yeah, why am I so angry or frustrated right now? Like I just need to take that time. And that like knowledge or that awareness, when it becomes a pattern or a habit, it just shifts everything so quickly. Like it's all you need to do is have that awareness. And it just takes a couple of seconds to just take a step back and like assess. And then things just get so much easier because you're not constantly, again, dishonoring yourself, which just usually creates more dishonor, and then resisting, which also creates more resistance. Like it's not always the most fun process to start when it's new to you, but I'm telling you, it pays off quite quickly. It's not like you've been practicing this crappy pattern for 30 years and it's going to take you 30 years to experience the results of shifting it. It's actually like fairly fast, the loop.
Yeah, well, it took me a lot of years to get sick. I was diagnosed when I was 19. Um, I'm 40 now, so I've been sick for, well, I wouldn't say that I'm sick anymore, but I had pretty severe Crohn's for a lot of those years. And it's really just been in the last, I don't know, 3 years or so that I have done a lot of shifting and a lot of healing. Yeah, it's actually pretty crazy how quickly you can shift and heal things. And some people might say, oh, 3 years is a lot of time, but really, if I didn't make any of these changes, I would have just continued down that path, that I was on for who knows how many years. And actually, like, I don't know how much longer I would have survived going down that path. So for me, it got to the point where I didn't really have a choice. I guess that you always have a choice, but it was like, if I want to actually live and have some kind of quality of life, like I need to make some changes.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
So hopefully there's people out there listening that you don't need to have things get that bad in your life. You can learn from my mistakes and my lessons and do some of this stuff a little earlier before things get real bad for you. But
I agree. So if people want to find you online or hear more about your journey, where can they find you? Is it Instagram?
Yeah, so I have my Instagram account is Inner Wisdom Healing Journey, all one word. So you can find me on there. Feel free to message me, and I'll respond as soon as I can.
Awesome. And I'll put her tag in the show notes. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we close this lovely session out?
I feel like we covered a lot today.
Yeah, me too. I'm impressed with all the area we covered, but that's exactly what I wanted to share with people, that it can happen. It's not just a one-off that I constantly talk about. It happens to people all the time, but you have to be willing to play with the universe to have it play back. So thank you so much for being here, Jaclyn. I'm sure we'll have more to unfold on future episodes because you have such a dynamic story, but I do appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you. I love talking about this stuff. So yeah, if anyone has any questions or wants to learn more about anything that Kayla and I talked about, please reach out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Kayla.